17. The Fallacy of Primitivism. Our thinking about various peoples too often begins with an illusion. We divide them into, quote, primitive, end quote, and, quote, civilized, end quote, peoples with some gradations between them. The actual difference is moral and religious. Darwinism has seriously warped our views of people on one of the Marquesas Islands studied by Dr. and Mrs. Robert C. Suggs, who published a report in 1962. The change in the islanders' sexual morality from their first contact with the Europeans to the present is very slight. By keeping outsiders from knowledge of their language, the people are able to maintain their culture with ease. The children of these islanders are trained and used in a number of violent and abusive practices, which are nearly universally considered serious criminal offences in other cultures, including those that have repudiated any obligation to a specifically Christian ethic. The French priests were unable to change the lives of their parishioners, who began their moral dereliction from early childhood. The priests Suggs met paid a grim price for their years of hard work. Suggs cited the case of one priest, quote, reduced to babbling idiocy by 38 years of toil amongst his unrepentant, resentful flock, end quote. Is this a racial problem? The people of the island are descendants not only of Marquesan Polynesians, but also of Annamese, American Negroes, Chinese, and assorted European peoples. Their genetic history is a quote-unquote good one. Their condition is one arising from a moral and religious choice. In biblical law, marriage with unbelievers is forbidden as treason to the covenant, Deuteronomy 7:3, Exodus 34:12-16. Marriage with a believer from an evil and debased people was possible, but the descendants of such a union could not, quote, enter into the congregation, end quote, that is, become officers or leaders unto the third, even the 10th generation, depending on the moral and religious background of the convert's subculture. An example of such a marriage is Ruth and Boaz. Ruth was honoured and respected, but it was only with David that the exclusion ended insofar as authority was concerned. The problem was not racial. It was moral and religious. The Indians were not, quote, primitive, end quote, peoples. They were morally and religiously decadent, and the same can be said for all the Europeans and other advanced peoples at one stage or another in their history. Certainly, the culture of Western man is moving downhill towards the Polynesian level described by Suggs. It must be added that the moral differences between the various Indian peoples were very real. Some men were like Chief Washaki of the Rushoonys, an early convert at an Episcopal mission and a remarkably superior man. Dr. Carlos Montezuma of the Yapaval Apache served early in the 20th century at the Western Shoshone Reservation as a medical doctor. The Reverend Sherman Coolidge, a Northern Arapaho and an Episcopalian rector, was a very able and effective pastor. There were differences among the tribes and among the peoples in a tribe. It is not an accident of history that existentialism arose in the 20th century and so powerfully influenced Western history. With its emphasis on the moment, not faith in history, existentialism feeds the urge to become, quote, primitive, end quote, and pleasure-oriented. While existentialism as a philosophy is now less prominent as a state of mind, it is becoming omnipresent. Existentialism is a normal state among so-called, quote, primitive, end quote, peoples. What has no meaning in terms of the moment is not remembered. While in the Western Shoshone Reservation, I had an Indian girl come in weekly to help with the housework, such things as ironing and briefly babysitting. When I returned briefly 3 years later, I saw her near a store and greeted her. She had no recollection of me whatsoever. I found this kind of episode commonplace. If a relative of an Indian family visited Fort Hall, the children 3 months later would not remember the incident because it was of no importance to them. This was not true of members of the older generation who were a part of a culture in which memory of a practical sort meant life. The protective atmosphere of reservation life made an existentialist life possible. Since my time, the reservation has become a center of casual suicide. For the roving bands of Indians prior to the reservation, life had been tenuous, death was always close. They could not afford the casualness of reservation Indians. Indian life has not been static. Many of the American Indians have seen the rise and decline of Christian faith and of advance and retreat in terms of growth beyond their earlier ways of living. The older generation I knew relished telling stories of their past, but they resented the attempts of the white man to bind them to that past. They had seen dramatic changes in the lives of white men, from ox carts to airplanes, and they saw no reason why Indians should be chained to the Indian past. Such an approach was to treat them as zoo specimens and the Indian reservation as an anthropologist's sanctuary and laboratory. To a few of the younger men, this was appealing. It gave them an opportunity to exploit the white man's folly. By the time I left, some of the Native American movements were beginning to make inroads. Their effect was to place a roadblock in the way of development and growth among Indians. If tomorrow a conquering power were to require that all white Americans return to the lifestyles and conditions of their ancestors of 2 centuries ago, they would rightfully consider it a form of oppression. It is no less oppressive when applied to the Indian.